threat that, if left untreated, can lead to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, even obesity-associated cancers and other health concerns.
Jessica Baluli, a family nurse practitioner who is a double board certified in women's health and family medicine, joining us again to break all of this down to talk about insulin resistance. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon,
Thanks
Jessica.
for having me.
Yeah.
Well, Jessica, before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, this is not medical advice. We always advise you to speak with your clinician for your particular problem, but it is some great information because, Jessica, I think insulin resistance, even just in the conversation I've had with you and preparing for the segment, is more common than you might think.
88% of Americans have some sort of metabolic dysfunction, so it's really prevalent in our community here and all over the country. Yep.
Yeah, so exactly what is insulin resistance?
Okay, so insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas. It acts as kind of the key that allows that blood sugar, the sugar that you've ingested, you've broken down in the GI tract, and then it's loose in the blood. It needs to get into the cells so that it can be used for metabolic processes. So if there's a reduction of insulin sensitivity because you have a high accumulation of blood sugar and the insulin's pumping out and it's not getting utilized in the way it should, that sugar just stays in the bloodstream. It gets redistributed as fat, usually in the midsection. It increases your inflammation and leads to a lot of chronic diseases.
So speaking of chronic diseases, perfect segue and transition, what medical conditions are associated with insulin resistance?
Okay, so not particularly to women, we'll get into those, but there are associations with obesity, with liver disease, fatty liver, with diabetes, of course, with heart disease, elevated blood pressure, and cholesterol. There is a propensity for women to have PCOS, infertility, also gestational diabetes during pregnancy, and then associated cancers like you mentioned, specifically breast cancer and endometrial cancer in the uterine lining.
Are some risk factors that come with insulin resistance. What are some of those factors?
Okay, so number one, sedentary lifestyle is one of them, and there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot of conveniences that come into play. We have a lot of things at our fingertips. We have food that's readily available and typically processed, so processed foods are a concern here. Risk factors might include elevated blood pressure, having that history, having a history of diabetes in your family or a PCOS family history, having history of other cancers that are associated. We see it often run in families. There is a genetic component often, but obesity and sedentary lifestyle, diet, high in processed foods are big components.
Yeah, but another instance where we see family history is so important to know it. A lot of people don't talk about these things, but that can really give you some key pieces to the puzzle.
It is. Genetics come into play in a lot of diseases, and I think, there's a lot of families who don't talk about those kinds of things, and it's important to have those discussions so that you know what your family is at a higher risk of, so that you can bring that up to your clinician.
Yeah, that's big.
And then when you talk about the symptoms that you could see signs of when it comes to insulin resistance, what are some things that people need to be able to decipher? This is insulin resistance symptoms, but it's not necessarily linked to another disease.
They're kind of sneaky, like you said. They do, we see them in a lot of different things. So low energy levels. Okay, obesity, weight gain, sweet cravings. There is something that a lot of people in our community get called acanthosis nigricans. It's kind of a velvety color that happens on the neck typically. The back of the neck. It may happen here in the bends.
Yeah, we've got a couple of pictures.
Yeah, we see it often
just to see that, because I obviously had no idea what it was, but when you see the photos, I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. You know what I mean?
It is, and we see that, and we can usually say, that is linked to insulin resistance, and we see it a lot in our communities for sure.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the questions that you should be asking your clinician. Also, what are the options for treatment? And y'all know lifestyle changes will always be a part of that conversation. We'll have more with Jessica Baluli right after this.